I'm Robert Klein. I'm 72 years old. This morning I walked out of a state penitentiary after serving a 45-year sentence for tax fraud. They gave me a bus ticket, $200, and this motel room key. But the prison sentence wasn't the worst of it. The worst was the silence. The silence I chose for 45 years. I need to break it right now before I see what's left of my life. Let me tell you what happened. It started in late 1979. I was an accounts payable clerk at the rubber plant in Goodyear Heights, Akron. A steady job. A divorced father of two, trying to make the child support. My world was invoices and spreadsheets. Then my older brother David showed up at my desk. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was pale. He was sweating. He pulled me aside, his voice a desperate whisper. He told me he was in deep with a bookie. Gambling debts. They were going to break his legs. He was terrified. You see, he knew I processed the vendor payments. He had a plan. One fake invoice. One payment to a shell company he'd set up. Just once. Just to save him. He begged me. He was my big brother. I'd looked up to him my whole life. I told him I needed to think, but I already knew my answer. I met him after work in the plant parking lot. The smell of rubber was always in the air. My hands didn't shake when I cut the check. I handed him the envelope. He hugged me, crying, calling me Robbie. He said, "I'll fix this. I'll pay it back in 6 months. You'll never know it happened." I believed him. I went home to my empty apartment and I said nothing to anyone. For 6 months I carried the secret. Then he came back, right on schedule. The debt was worse. He needed it again. Just one more time, Robbie, then I'm clean. The habit was set. It wasn't a decision anymore. It was a rhythm, a secret rhythm. My kids would visit, and I'd be distracted. I was building a wall of silence between us, brick by brick. And then it happened a third time. By then, I was just going through the motions. August 1980. The IRS audit notice hit the company. My boss said it was routine. Don't worry. I brought a copy home. I laid it on my kitchen table and just stared. My wife, we were separated but still talking, called. She asked what was wrong. I heard the concern in her voice. I said nothing, just work. That was the lie that sealed it. A week later, they called me into the conference room. 2 IRS agents, my boss. The paperwork laid out neat on the table. They pointed to the discrepancies. The shell company, the signatures. They asked me, polite at first, to explain. I looked at the trail. It led straight to David. I thought my silence was strength. I thought taking the full blame was noble, that I was protecting him. So I said nothing, not a single word. The silence in that room was louder than any sentence. It was fast, charged, convicted, sentenced before the leaves turned that fall. Tax fraud. One long-term decision, they called it. 45 years. My wife finalized the divorce. My kids were just faces in photographs. As they led me away, I held onto my silence like a shield. I thought it was all I had left. 2 years in, I got a letter from my sister-in-law. David was gone. He'd killed himself. The guilt, she wrote, had eaten him alive. He'd never recovered from what I'd done for him. what I'd taken from him by not letting him share the blame. That night I screamed into my pillow so the guards wouldn't hear. My silence hadn't protected him. It had murdered him. That's when the real prison sentence began. The next 43 years were just serving time. 45 years of minimal contact. Occasional letters from my kids, adults now, with families I've never met. My parents died. The world changed. I stayed the same man in that cell, defined by that one moment of silent choice. I wore my silence as a badge of honor, a martyr's cloak. It took me 45 years to realize it was just a shroud. This morning, when those gates closed behind me, I knew I couldn't carry it anymore. Here's the thing. The mistake wasn't the fraud. That was a crime. The mistake was the silence. I believed withholding my reason, my pathetic why, was protecting my family. It wasn't. It was a prison I built for myself and forced them to visit. Explanation is not an excuse. It's a bridge. I burned mine with silence. David needed to confess as much as I did, and I robbed him of that. So I'm speaking now. It's too late for most of it, but it's not too late for this. So I'm speaking now. It's too late for most of it, but it's not too late for this. I'm sitting in this motel room, the air conditioner rattling, and I'm talking to this camera on a phone I don't really know how to use, because I need you to understand the weight of it, the sheer, stupid weight of the silence. You see, in prison, silence becomes your currency. You trade in it. You learn to say nothing, to show nothing, to be a blank wall. I got good at it. I thought I was mastering my punishment, but I was just extending it. Every visit that ended in awkward quiet, every letter I wrote back that said nothing real. I'm fine. The weather is fine. It was another brick in the wall. Let me give you a specific moment. It was 1995. My daughter, Sarah, she was 25 by then. She came to see me. She brought a picture of her baby, my first grandchild, a little boy. She slid the photo through the slot in the glass. I picked it up. My hands were shaking. He had her eyes. I looked at her, and I saw the woman she'd become and the little girl I'd left behind. She was waiting. She was waiting for me to say something, anything real. And what did I say? I said, he's handsome. That's it. I handed the photo back. I didn't ask his name. I didn't ask how she was feeling being a mother. I didn't tell her I was proud of her. I just sat there, locked behind my silence, thinking I was protecting her from my mess, from my shame. She tried. She said, Dad, do you ever think about why? She couldn't even finish the sentence, and I just shook my head. I said, it's done, honey. Don't worry about it. The visit ended 10 minutes early. She never brought her son to see me. Can you blame her? I was a ghost, a polite, silent ghost. That's what my silence did. It wasn't a shield for them. It was a rejection. It told them their father was a closed book, and the one chapter they wanted to read was glued shut. The letters from my son Michael were worse in a way. They were so careful. He'd write about his job, his wife. Never any big questions, just updates, like he was reporting to a distant relative. In 2008, he wrote that he was moving to Seattle for a promotion. He said, "I wish you could have seen the house before we left." That line broke me. But did I write back and say, "I wish I could have too, every day"? No, I wrote, "Congratulations on the promotion. Seattle is rainy." I signed it, Dad. Not love Dad, just Dad. I was punishing myself, and I was punishing him for my crime. That's the poison of silence. It spreads. And all that time, I wore it like a badge. I told myself, "You're taking your medicine. You're not making excuses." I thought my refusal to explain was the last honorable thing I could do. What a joke. What a pathetic, arrogant joke. The realization didn't come in one big flash. It was a slow leak, a drip, drip, drip over decades. It was reading a letter from my brother's widow, years after the first one, where she said David had left a note. She never told me what it said, but she wrote, "He always said you never let him explain." That sentence sat in my gut like a stone. It was seeing other men in the yard get visits, get into shouting matches with their families, tears, apologies, reconciliation. The noise of it, the messy, ugly, beautiful noise of people trying to fix things. And there I was, sitting on a bench, the quiet man, the good inmate. I was envying their fights. Can you believe that? I was envying the men who were screaming, because at least they were talking. The last 5 years inside, that's when it crystallized. I had a cellmate for a while, a young guy in for something stupid. He talked nonstop, drove me crazy. One night he was going on about his girlfriend, how he'd messed up, how he was going to explain everything to her when he got out, how she'd understand. I snapped at him. I said, "She won't understand. They never do. Just save your breath." He looked at me, really looked at me, and he said, "Man, you sound like you're already dead." He didn't say it to be cruel. He said it like it was a fact. And he was right. I was a dead man walking. I'd killed myself with silence 45 years earlier in that conference room. I'd let the sentence they gave me become my entire identity. I was Robert Klein, the man who didn't speak. Not a father, not a brother, not even a real criminal with a motive. Just a void. This morning, walking to the bus stop with my pathetic little bag, the world was so loud. Cars, phones, people laughing. It was terrifying. My first instinct was to shrink into my silence, to make myself small and quiet. But then I saw a man about my age, walking with a little girl, his granddaughter probably. He was telling her a story, waving his hands, and she was laughing. The sound of it. It was like a physical pain, right here in my chest. I got on the bus. I stared out the window at a world that had become science fiction, and I made a decision. Before I try to find my children, before I do anything else, I have to say it all out loud. I have to speak the truth of my mistake into existence, not the crime, the silence. Because if I show up on their doorstep as the same silent ghost, it's over. There's no chance. This is me scraping the rust off my voice. This is me trying to find the bridge I burned, even if all I have left are a few charred planks to offer. This is me trying to find the bridge I burned, even if all I have left are a few charred planks to offer. And I think the moment I truly understood the cost, the real final cost, was about 10 years ago. I got a letter from my son Michael. It wasn't an update. It was a question. One question typed on a plain sheet of paper. It said, "Dad, I need to know. Did you do it for us? For me and Sarah? Was it for the child support?" I held that paper and I just broke. I cried right there at the metal table in the common area. Other inmates looked away. Because here it was, the one thing my children had needed for 40 years, the one key that might have unlocked something, and I had thrown it away. He was giving me a chance to be a hero in my story, even a flawed, stupid hero, to say, "Yes, son, I was trying to provide for you." It would have been a lie, but it would have been a lie he could understand. A father's failing love is easier to forgive than a brother's silent, senseless loyalty. And what did I write back? I wrote back the truth, the sterile, useless truth. I said, "No, Michael, it was for my brother David to pay a gambling debt." I mailed it. I didn't explain the pressure, the fear, the twisted sense of duty. I just stated the fact, like I was filling out a form. I never heard from him again. Not a letter, not a word. That silence was my answer. I had chosen my brother over my children in the crime, and then I chose my silence over my children for the rest of my life. I killed 2 relationships with 1 refusal to speak. That's the poison. It festers. My daughter Sarah, she tried longer. She'd send a card on my birthday for years. Just a store-bought card signed Sarah. No note. And then 5 years ago, the card came. I opened it, and inside she had written something. My heart jumped. It was 3 words. I have cancer. That's all. I have cancer. I wrote back immediately. My hand was shaking so bad the writing was a child's scrawl. I asked what kind, what stage, what the doctor said, how I could help. I begged for information. I said I was sorry, so sorry that I wasn't there. I poured everything into that letter I had never poured into 40 years of letters. I mailed it. I waited. A month went by. Nothing. 2 months. I wrote again. "Please, Sarah, just tell me you're okay." The reply came on a single line of notebook paper. It said, "I'm in treatment. It's fine. Don't worry. Don't worry." After 40 years of my silence, she had learned it perfectly. She had mastered the language I taught her. She gave me the exact same nothing I had always given her. That was the legacy. That was the inheritance. I had taught my children how to build walls. And now, when I was finally desperate to tear mine down, I found theirs were impenetrable. I had built them too well. I sat on my bunk with that slip of paper, and I felt it. The full, crushing weight of all those years. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness anymore. It was a hollow, howling certainty. I had wasted it. All of it. Every single day of those 45 years, I had chosen the wrong thing. I thought my silence was taking responsibility. It was running away. I thought it was noble. It was cowardly. David needed to scream his guilt from the rooftops, and I shut him in a soundproof room with it. My kids needed a reason, any reason, and I gave them a blank space. My ex-wife needed to know the man she'd married wasn't a monster, just a fool, and I let her think the worst. The hardest part? The very hardest part to admit. In here, in this system, you become a number. You lose your name. But I realized I had done that to myself first. I had reduced myself to a single action, the fraud. And then I had erased my own humanity by refusing to explain it. I wasn't Robert Klein, father, brother, flawed man. I was inmate Klein, the one who doesn't talk. And I did that to myself. The last visit I ever had was with a chaplain, about a year before my release. He was new, young. He asked me the standard question, "Do you feel you've been rehabilitated?" I almost laughed. But then I looked at him and I said the first completely honest thing I'd said in decades. I said, "I don't know what that word means for me, but I know I've been wrong for 45 years about the one thing that mattered most." He waited for me to go on. The old habit, the silence, it surged up, clamped down, say nothing. But I fought it. My voice was a rasp. I said, I thought silence was my punishment. It was my crime, the ongoing crime, and I'm the only one who can parole myself from it. He just nodded. He didn't offer some scripture or some easy comfort. He said, "That sounds like a good place to start." That conversation, that tiny crack in the wall, is why I'm here talking to this camera in this motel room that smells like bleach and old cigarettes. The fraud put me in a cell, but my silence, that's what turned the lock and threw away the key. I served every single day of that sentence. And for what? For a principle that was never true. For a protection that never worked. For a strength that was just fear wearing a mask. I look at my hands now. They're old, spotted. They're the same hands that signed that first check in the rubber plant parking lot in 1979. They've been still for so long. But today they're holding this phone, and I'm using my voice. It's scratchy, it's unfamiliar, but it's mine. And for the first time in 45 years, it's saying something real. And for the first time in 45 years, it's saying something real. Here's what I understand now, what I wish I'd understood in that conference room in 1980. The mistake wasn't the fraud. That was a crime, and I paid for it. The mistake was the silence that followed. I thought my silence was a shield. I thought by saying nothing, by offering no excuse, I was taking the full weight nobly. I was protecting my brother and sparing my family the ugly details. But I was wrong. My silence was a vacuum, and in that vacuum the worst possible assumptions grew. It wasn't protection, it was abandonment. I abandoned David to his guilt. I abandoned my children to their confusion. I left them all in the dark with a monster of my making, and I called it honor. I looked at my brother's desperation, and I saw a problem I could fix with a check. I looked at the IRS agents, and I saw an enemy I could defy with quiet defiance. But I never looked at my family and saw people who needed a story, people who needed to understand the why, even if the why was stupid and weak and human. Because without the why, all they had was the what. And the what was that their father, their brother, was a criminal, a thief, a man who betrayed trust for money. The truth that I was a scared little brother trying to save his hero from a beating, that truth was messy and pathetic, but it was human. My silence stripped me of my humanity. It made me a statistic, a case file, one long-term decision. I let the state define me because I was too proud, too scared to define myself. My advice to you, if you're holding on to something, is this: speak now. Don't wait for a crisis. Don't wait for an audit or a confrontation or a letter that changes everything. The secret you're carrying, the hurt you're nursing, the mistake you think you've buried, it's not dead. It's dormant, and it's poisoning the soil of your life. Find someone you trust, or find a blank page, or find a camera like this, but give it a voice, give it air. Explanation is not the same as excuse. An excuse says, therefore it was okay. An explanation says, this is why it happened. This is the flawed, frightened person who did it. An explanation builds a bridge, however rickety, back to the people you love. My silence wasn't a bridge. It was a drawbridge I pulled up and set on fire, and I stood on the other side for 45 years wondering why I was so alone. You might think your silence is keeping the peace. You're not. You're just storing up conflict for later with interest. You might think it's protecting someone. You're probably protecting yourself from the hard, vulnerable work of being known. The real protection is in the messy, difficult truth. David needed to stand beside me and say, I made him do it. He needed that catharsis. I robbed him of it. I sentenced him to a solitary confinement of guilt that he couldn't survive. My children needed a story, any story to hang on to. I gave them a blank space, and they filled it with their own pain and their own conclusions, which were always worse than the reality. Speak, even if your voice shakes, even if the words are ugly. A shouted truth is better than a peaceful lie. A shared burden is lighter than a solitary cross. I'm 72. I have a bus ticket to nowhere and $200. The life I knew is gone. My brother is gone. My parents are gone. My children are strangers with my eyes. It's too late for so much. It is. I have to be honest about that. I can't get those years back. I can't undo the hurt my silence caused. But it is not too late for this moment. It is not too late for me to finally use my voice to say the things I should have said in 1980, to offer the explanation, not to excuse the crime, but to reclaim my own humanity from it. And if you're watching this, you are not 72 years old and just out of prison. You have time. You have today. You have the phone in your hand or the person in the next room. Start there. This channel, I'm told, is for stories like mine, for people who've lived a long time and learned a hard lesson too late not to share it. If what I've said here tonight in this motel room has meant something to you, if it's made you think of a secret you're carrying or a conversation you've been avoiding, then do something for me. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the notifications. Not for me, but for yourself, so you can hear other stories that might shake something loose. Leave a comment down below. Tell me, what's the silence you're keeping? Just writing it down, even anonymously, is a first step. Or tell me if you've broken a silence and what happened. That gives me hope. If this story resonated, hit the like button. Tells the algorithm to show this to someone else who might need to hear it. And please, share it. Share it with the friend who's been quiet lately. Share it with the family member you've been meaning to talk to. You never know what lock your share might be the key to. Maybe you have a story of your own, a lesson learned the hard way. There's a form in the description below. Fill it out. Maybe your story will be the one that helps someone else find their voice before it's too late. I'd recommend a book, but the books I read are 45 years out of date. The only wisdom I have is what I've lived. And what I've lived tells me this: the walls you build to protect yourself become the walls of your cell. The silence you think is your strength is the lock on the door. You have the key. It's your voice. Use it. Don't wait 45 years. Don't wait one more day. Just speak.